Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Cole. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. Our topic is empowering innovation, collaborating with small business in public sector IT. We'll be focusing on emerging technology, IT, and small business in a federal setting. Great timing given everything going on in the market. We're going to be talking about the value and the how of partnering between agencies and small business in 2026, touching on best practices and sources of funds. We'll also incorporate updates on procurement policies and arm our audience with key takeaways and best practices that they can use in their agency office or within policy shop or as a small business contractor going forward. We have a really amazing panel. I'm going to introduce them in a second, but I want to first get to a quick rundown. We'll be covering a number of topics based on interviews that we had prior to this webinar with the panelists, along with executives in government and small business. Please feel free to ask questions and use Zoom for that in the interactive chat box, and we'll try to get to them either at the end or throughout the panel. We'll also have a couple survey questions for CPE credits as we go through, and please answer those as they pop up. So we have a really amazing panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but just quickly, Colonel Nathan Stuckey with AFWERX in the Air Force, Ann Haas with NASA, and from industry, Lizzie Sullivan with Madison Services Group. So I'll let each person do a quick intro of themselves, their organization, and their role with small business. I'll start with you, Colonel Stuckey.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Colonel Nathan Stuckey. I'm the AFWERX director, which also includes SpaceWorks. And we run the SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Sitter program for the DAF. So that's Air Force and the Space Force. So when I look at that, that's approximately about a $1.4 billion a year program. And I look at that as kind of like the Air Force's VC fund. That is, it entirely goes to small businesses, and it is used to, used to seek out technology and also to grow small businesses and to bring new companies into the defense industrial base.
Awesome. Thank you, Colonel. And next, we have Ann Haas with NASA.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here today. My name's Ann Haase. I'm one of the program managers at the Office of Small Business Programs within NASA. I've been with NASA since 1989, primarily in acquisitions for construction projects, IT, research and development. In the last couple of years, I've been in the Office of Small Business Programs, overseeing the small business specialists across the agency. In the acquisition support office. And at one time I was dual-hatted between overseeing a satellite program and working as a small business specialist. So I'm so excited to be here to share information, and hope you walk away with plenty of resources to go forth and do business with NASA. So thank you.
Awesome, Ann. Thank you. And last but not least, Lizzie Sullivan with Madison Services Group.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lizzie, president of Madison Services Group. My firm specializes in the GovCon sector, working with businesses and associations to build their voice in Washington. So we are outside of government. We work with Congress, federal agencies, and the administration to affect positive change on contracting policies with a specialized focus on small and mid-sized companies. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thanks, Lizzie. And I'm your moderator, Michael Crosby, CEO of Leadership Connect. We're a procurement intelligence service. We work with about 1,000 organizations, work with the administration, Congress, contractors, policy shops. We actually did a study of the Air Force and AFWERX's cyber program, and they actually do a little bit better than venture funds in terms of success of their investments through the program. So that was something we did a couple of years ago. So I'm sure the numbers are still hold true to the Air Force. And then we also did a number of surveys and kind of primary research and prep for this webinar. And contrary to maybe what's in the news a little bit, I actually heard a lot of positive things going on within the agencies themselves. And I had a great call with a small business that's ramped up from 10 million to 100 million in federal contract revenue over the last 3 years. So I think it'll be a mix of practicality on this call, but also enthusiasm for the opportunity for small business. So let's get to our first topic, broadening the supply chain. So I think we hear from every agency, the Department of War, on the need to broaden the industrial base. And maybe we'll start with you, Colonel, on can you share the steps your office is taking to accomplish this?
Yeah, I would say that's one of the primary goals of my organization. And we've been able to use the cyber program, I think, to great success in this area. And part of that is a multi-tiered approach to the cyber program. If you've looked, there's like phase one, phase two, follow-on opportunities. We have what's called Strat 5, which is our strategic, much larger dollar value type programs where those can get into the 50 and $60 million type of programs. But what we've repeatedly seen is that a lot of companies, their very first contract with DoD is through the cyber program, and some of those are now some of the big players in the space. Anduril's an example now that is a very large player that got their first defense contract through us, the cyber program, and I can give many other examples. So it is there's a broad opportunity. It's got a big front door, and then it's got follow-on opportunities like phase twos for those that perform well in the initial opportunities. So that has been a kind of a deliberate approach to step companies through, and the ultimate goal is to get companies where they are competing for non-cyber contracts in the Air Force and DoD as a whole. So I think it's been a wildly successful program, and it's done with intent. There's things that we've got through part of it to help companies mature and grow to greater opportunities and scale as appropriate. So I think it's been like I said, I think it's one of our really primary goals, because it's broadening the industrial base is extremely important, especially when you look at some of the areas where you don't want to be constrained into just a small number of vendors.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And same question.
Yeah, great question. I wanted to give you a backdrop for Office of Small Business Programs. We're governed by the Small Business Act. Really, our mission is to maximize small business opportunities. There's also, specific to NASA, is the National Aeronautics and Space Act, which we call the Space Act. And this is where we are supposed to maximize contracts, lease agreements, and all those other transactions, maximize those to small business in terms of providing them opportunities. And then next is the executive order ensuring American space superiority, and that ties directly into having and growing a healthy industrial base. One of those areas in the executive order is modernizing acquisitions. And this is prioritizing commercial solutions and strengthening the industrial base. So with my leadership, excellent leadership, the assistant administrator for Office of Small Business Programs Mr. Dwight Daniil. He has strategically lined our priorities with all those governances, especially, where we are today with trying to have a healthy industrial base. So I wanted to just share really briefly, because I don't want to take up too much time, but for everyone's knowledge, there's 4 strategic priorities for our office. One is to reshape and standardize small business industry engagement. That is so key in providing those opportunities where we have outreach, we have learning series. We encourage industry to attend those outreach events and connect with technical organizations, with OP, with small business specialists. The second priority is refocusing the small business program to establish a center. We have a Center for Small Business Supply Chain Analytics and Industrial Base Advancement. This is key to creating an acquisition process that creates a hub of information for us to make decisions on our acquisition strategy and where we can best utilize that strategy to actually reach out and expand the base. Third, I got 2 more, redeploy small business subcontracting tactics to expand the industrial base. So small business subcontracting, that's a way that companies can get their foot in the door in terms of subcontracting with our primes. We have redeployed our NASA Mentor Protege program. So coming in, marking yourself to primes to become a protege is another way to expand that base. And all this information is on our website, but I just wanted to highlight these things. And then finally, redesigning and maintaining a strong program based on our statutory performance. We've realigned to just focus on those key areas of statutory versus the nice things to do. We are really focusing on expanding that industrial base. And these are the initiatives and strategic directions of our office. So that is, that's our process for making sure that we align with the executive order and what we're here to do in terms of maximizing opportunities.
That's great, and you kind of started touching on focal areas. Are there and I know a lot of this information is out there in public, but what would you say are like the key focal areas that come to mind in terms of, from an IT and emerging technology standpoint? I don't expect you to go through every single one of them that's out there, but that comes to mind.
Well, there is a great resource, and it's been out there for a while, but industry really doesn't know much about it. It's called NASA TechPort.
Mm-hmm.
And in this TechPort, there's just a diverse, extensive list of technologies in all arenas that NASA has invested in. And so, I mean, I have so let me just share with you from this TechPort. There's so many. I have one example, for instance, performing safe, Earth-independent, extra vehicular activities on the lunar surface. And then we go into needs of those technology developments. And I know the IT part is a strong focus here, but there's also that technology aspect. And I'm sure there's a lot of IT associated with that. But I wanted to make sure also for those key areas is on this system, there's actually identification of civil space shortfalls. There's also identification of funding opportunities link. And the TechPort is associated with our SBIR STTR program, just so you know. So all the phase 1 and phase 2 contracts are listed in there. So that, as far as providing an example, it's just a diverse array of opportunities there, and especially aligning where our shortfalls are to capabilities of small companies. There's also a link to actually contact someone at TechPort, how you can become a vendor. I know we're waiting on the reauthorization, but also just so key is that funding those funding opportunities, if those opportunities align with your capabilities, I mean, that's key to attempting to do business with NASA. And so those resources are definitely out there for industry to review and research, make contact. And actually, I mean, we need small business. We need those technologies. We need the expertise to help fill the gap with supply chain and to also help with the shortfalls in these technology areas.
And we'll, a note for the audience today, we'll be following up with, links to anything that the panelists bring up. Colonel, like I know when we studied the SIBR program at the Air Force 24 months ago, AI and material science came up significantly, I think as number one and number two within at least SIBR program. In 2026, does that hold true, or are the priorities slightly different this year?
No, I would say those are still some pretty big priority areas for AI and material science. I would say like in the AI space, like some of the areas of focus are looking at like space resilience and intelligence. How can we use AI for looking at the space data and giving us better insights amongst a multitude of AI areas. Some of the areas also looking at is automation, especially when it comes down to things like our I'm sure you guys heard the CCA program, like our collaborative combat aircraft. But again, the trying to build a diverse advanced mission systems architecture that allows multiple vendors to participate in the overall architecture for autonomy. The actual air vehicle is only one aspect of it, but creating those open system architectures that allow vendors to compete in space. And it's just not the CCA when it comes to automation, right? There's as you've seen, the small UAS has been a priority space both in the offense and defense. But then it comes down to how do you command and control, how do you build AI into those systems so they can operate in an autonomous manner. One of the big areas Air Force wide, and we're linked in with that, is the C3BM program, which is command and control, communications, and battle management. But working with those organizations to bring in additional vendors to that, again, as not as just a one company type of approach to these command and control battle management systems, but bringing in open system architecture so we can bring more solutions and technology into that space. So I really see a lot of growth as we get to where the battle space is increasingly filled with larger numbers of unmanned platforms. All of the various IT that goes into not only the aircraft being autonomous, but also the command control, the communications, the whole backbone associated with that. And the goal is to get that to be a multi vendor space where I see a lot of opportunities for small business to be part of that space. So that DoD's and Air Force is obviously very wide, so there's more opportunities I can never talk about, but these are just some of the focus areas that I can see that are growing. You talk about like areas to find out more about to learn about those opportunities. We have the AFWERX.com website, and then with my SpaceWorks side, it's spaceworks.us. And then for the DoD SIBR program as a whole, there's the DSIP website, and that is where all of the SIBR solicitations are advertised, not just for the Air Force, but including the Army, Navy, and that's on the DoD SIBRsitter.mil website. So there's a lot of different opportunities to get what the opportunities are for small business.
Michael, could
That's
I
great. Thank you.
add something real quick? In terms of identifying opportunities, of course, there's sam.gov. I think that's pretty well known, but we also have our acquisition forecasts that we post. And in particular, we have an active contract listing where folks can see what are our active contracts and they can connect with potential primes, see what's going on in the horizon, of course. And we have our Silver Sitter website. And then we have Inspires, which is actually a NASA solicitation proposal, integrated review and evaluation system. And this is where NASA solicits research through release of various research announcements. And this is where researchers can help NASA achieve their objectives. And some of the key areas, which is just real quick, advanced avionics, advanced manufacturing, advanced propulsion, pretty much advanced everything technology. But I wanted to throw out where folks can identify procurement opportunities also. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Ann. And Lizzie, like with your firms that you're working with, is there a particular area that you've seen where there's a shift over the last year, or does it map to what the Colonel and Ann reviewed?
I mean, I think they definitely hit the nail on the head on what industry has seen coming out of government. One of the places that, pro tip to look for some additional guidance on that I know industry has been checking is the federal appropriations bills. That's all public information, and there's a lot of directives in there from Congress to the agencies and kind of some big picture thoughts on what they want to focus on. But wow, cybersecurity used to be the hot word there, and now it's AI. And both of my fellow panelists went to much better detail than I could. But yeah, I think that's what industry has been focusing on and shifting to focus on if they are having to diversify their offerings.
That's great. And so let's stick with you, Lizzie, and you mentioned industry. So let's talk about dual use. AI is a really good example of dual use, technology. There's a lot of SaaS businesses. There's, 500,000, tech companies in the U.S., and I think the federal government only works with, less than 1% of them. Can you speak to like what's that balance? Like, what role does the government have to like attract tech companies that have valuable technology that the federal government could use? What's the role that the government should have in marketing itself when traditionally a lot of the information is available on public websites within government and SAM and wherever. But if I'm a tech company, AI company, whoever it is, with great technology, and maybe I'm indifferent to working with the government, I'm probably not looking at those websites. But maybe if I'm sitting at AFWERX or the Navy or NASA or Homeland Security or wherever, I still want to get those those tech companies in the mix. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, there's been a lot of change over the past year. And in that change, there has been opportunity, right? So the FAR rewrite, the Department of War's acquisition strategy, signals from those congressional committees I talked about overseeing procurement, all of those I think have pointed to the importance of speed in contracting and those calls for use of IT to solve government problems, including internally at agencies as well. So the Colonel and Anne can correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be more openness to unsolicited proposals from companies, new entrants, as you said, that are maybe taking less traditional approaches to getting into government from the industry side. I know smalls have definitely been looking to agencies for guidance for this, right? And the small business offices in the incredibly important role that they play in gaining that entry. And so with that shift of government not being at traditional conferences, they've been at in the past, right? And kind of having some of those things that industry used to be able to count on, like the procurement forecasts, forums like this and other forums where the agencies can get out to businesses and break those barriers are always super welcome by industry. But I think there's definitely a lot of guidance that smalls are looking for from agencies, especially right now, on how to do that.
And Colonel, we talked about this in our prep about a directive from the Secretary's office around adapting commercial AI technologies into the war fighter in a expeditious period of time. So that feels like dual use. What are your thoughts? Especially and there's a question from the audience specific to AI, also looking at kind of risk as it relates to some of these AI systems.
Yeah, so I mean, there has been a very much a focus on dual use technology, especially within the last year, not just in AI, but in other areas. Basically coming out of OSW, in that prioritize dual use capabilities to the maximum extent possible. Our RDT&E budgets are constrained, and so as much as we can bring in dual use technology, that can allow the RDT&E budgets we have to go after specific maybe things that we can only go after on DoD wide. So, it's been, don't go after DoD specific solutions when we have dual use commercial solutions available, has been very much priority area pushed from the OSW level again over the last year. And I think my organization is a big part of helping making that happen. Through the Cyber Sitter program. You have a question about risk in AI. I mean, I think that is something that is really goes to the individual use case, and as with any technology or use case, right? So, when it comes to things like AI, automation, command and control, right? It's building the right infrastructure in place and the right safeguards so that in something like command and control, right, you have the what the proper role of AI and what it's able to recommend, decide. I mean, a lot of it I see is AI as being a tool to help uh, with how things are executed, right? So, things like shifting through large data sets, right? And then the results get put out, right? Doing that, those are things we could do before, but AI is making that able to do in a much better way. And so, but there's ways to build design the system in such a manner that, that's consistent with the risk level that you're trying to look at. So, but I think it's something that, is still a place that needs more work, right? And so some of the effort is just what is the right way to do that, right? How to architect your software, how to architect your systems so that AI, and I think testing is another aspect that still is a growth area, right? Like, because a lot of ways your results from AI are non-deterministic, which is sometimes a little bit of a new space for testing, because you can sometimes get different results for the same inputs, right? So I think there's still growth area needed, but I also think that there are lots and lots of areas where AI is moving forward because we've been able to identify the right way to utilize it without putting the mission to undue risk. And I think as this technology matures, it will help inform greater and greater use cases, right? I think as you're starting, right, you're looking for more of those lower risk use areas, like sorting big trove of data is pretty low risk, right? If you still take the output and do the other, but like controlling an air platform is probably a little bit higher risk, right? So I think it's growing as we get more comfort and more experience in the space as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like our own personal experience, because we use a fair amount of AI in our company. It's a journey. It's not you can get great results off a pilot with a small amount of data in, literally days or weeks. But if you want to go scale that across a much larger set of data, and then your tolerance for an error, whether that's a false positive or false negative, starts changing, then all of a sudden that project extends to a year, you know, plus, and we're smaller companies, and we kind of turn on a dime. So it's worth the effort, but it's, the quick returns. Quick returns are there if you're planning your vacation and you're looking for great restaurants and places to go to, but it's a little different when you're working with a larger data set. But thinking again, kind of sticking with dual use, thinking about small businesses that you want to work with. Let's talk about kind of that journey to the first contract. So you'll typically hear that, set the expectation 18 to 24 months. But in my interviews with procurement executives, occasionally they're seeing much shorter time periods because I think there's um, a pressure to show ROI and kind of put together prototypes and move faster so that periods of time can be shorter, but everyone cites a trust relationship in order to get there. Maybe let's go to Anne on this one. What like what should the expectations be on both sides, as far as the contractor working with, in your case, NASA, or an office at NASA, and they, here's, we're starting to talk to these, this contractor really like what they do. What
Okay.
is kind of the range of expectations that someone should have so they're not
Okay.
too pessimistic or
Well,
too
right,
optimistic?
right. So let me frame it out a little bit. So the 18 months is really, um, it's not a all size fits all. It really depends on the scope of the requirement, the magnitude of the requirement, and that time frame that I had mentioned previously yesterday when we were talking is more so how much time a company has to invest to prepare themselves to submit a proposal for a solicitation, because there's a lot of homework, there's a lot of research that goes into um, being competitive for a solicitation. Now, when it comes to actually putting a contract in place, I mean, I know our Office of Procurement, I mean, there are huge initiatives to do things faster and more efficient, especially with the FAR overhaul. Getting rid of duplicative language, getting away from things that are not statutory requirements, and so allowing COs, contracting officers, to really, a lot of flexibilities there, so we can do things faster and better, efficient. I don't want to say cheaper, but cost effective. I guess cost effective. So the whole thing about the 18 months is that there's definitely a process for industry to market their capabilities, not only to NASA, but just in general to the federal government. And I can't emphasize enough that it takes time, it takes patience, it takes perseverance with that. And I know I'm going to say this a lot, but on our website, but I'm going to share this information now. But there's information, there's like this pamphlet on how to do business with NASA. There's a lot of steps. There's like, 4 or 5 steps, but each of those steps are pretty comprehensive. I mean, one of the things is connection, like connecting with Office of Small Business Programs. We have a NASA vendor database of companies interested in doing business with NASA that we use for market research. We have our mobile app to give you just real-time information on what our office is involved in, what we're doing, and then also LinkedIn. So I would say take advantage of that information and those engagement opportunities. Next is we have small business specialists at each center. So we stand ready to help and to counsel small businesses to come in, to meet with us. There's just so much good information to share in terms of what each center is concentrated on and what the NACE codes, concentration of NACE codes at each center. A center has, we have an overarching mission, but there's focus areas at that center. So aligning your capabilities with what the center is, what the NAICS codes at that center. So really matching your primary NAICS codes with the center NAICS codes. The other thing is when RFIs are issued or sources sought are issued, to respond to that. I mean, there's the opportunity where you can, share your capabilities with NASA. And if we find, two or more, or of course there's flexibilities there, but the more small businesses that respond and we find capable, there's more opportunities that the government can determine, well, maybe this is appropriate for a set-aside acquisition. Also attending industry days, that's so key, especially if there's a requirement out there. I mean, that's so key to connect, get plugged in. You've got contracting officers there, you've got the technical organizations there, and then you also have the small businesses, the small business specialists there, and also potential prime, so marketing for potential subcontracting opportunities. And again, as I said before, attending those outreach events, we record all our webinars. There was an annual, Mr. Daniil held an annual town hall. It was called Unlocking Small Business Competition for a New Space Economy. And he went over our statutory functions, an overview of the RFO and how it impacts small business, our organizational structure. We also had keynote speakers for the SBR, our program exec for the SBR STTR program, and also Dr. Holly Miller that came in to talk to OSTEM, which is our Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics office. The other thing about doing business with NASA, and again, this spans across the government, but I don't know if folks are familiar with the APEX accelerators, which used to be called Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. If you can just go to that website, find a location, connect with somebody there, they can be the critical front door for American businesses seeking to enter government contracting. They help identify businesses to see how ready they are to get in the market and, submitting a proposal to a solicitation. They help with networking, registration assistance, and you have to register in SAM, and there's other websites that folks should be registered at. Proposals, market research, contract support, also identifying opportunities. So I would say that, it is a process. So that 18-month is, the sooner you can start in identifying opportunities, not just on the acquisition forecast, but one of the key documents that we have are the active contract listings, where you can see when contracts are due to expire and whether there's a follow-on. You can start looking at that statement of work, start talking to the technical person, start building those relationships. You need to start this way ahead of the curve. But again, just being patient and tactical about how to pursue business, and also having that perseverance, because it takes time. There's no guarantee, but there's possibility and a potential.
And if I could just
That's great.
add on to that, Michael, just from what I'm hearing from
Yes.
Anne, right, is information and relationships, right, is really what she's focused on. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention how important the OSDBU or Office of Small Business Programs are, and the small business specialists there. And so I have to plug this, if you found them to be useful, there was a big shift in the rewrite and the revolutionary FAR overhaul in Part 7. While it kept the responsibility of coordinating with the Office of Small Business Programs, or OSDBUs, when a contract is consolidated or bundled, the general requirement to coordinate large contract acquisition plans with small business specialists will no longer exist. I'm saying that because this is not yet final, even though this process has been through deviation. So if you have found them very useful, of which they very much are, when the regulations come out and the FAR Council puts them out, please comment on them. Small business specialists make a difference, and that difference is even evident in case law. It's evident on vehicles like NASA Soup, and how NASA has really made that the absolute benchmark of best GWACs for small business across government. So those, building those relationships is really important. And those are a lot of the key people there. So I want to make sure that I put that out there for everyone listening.
And if I could tag on to what you said, Lizzie, yes, FAR Part 7, a lot of changes there. But I wanted to also call everyone's attention to FAR Part 1, Federal Acquisition System. And it says the acquisition team members in the system include government acquisition representatives from technical, supply, sourcing, and small business and procurement areas. So we're actually working with our OP. I mean, we really do our organization and just the relationship between our Office of Procurement and Office of Small Business Programs, we're forging a partnership there. So we still have a statute to fulfill to maximize opportunities. And in particular, with the Space Act, it calls it out particularly for NASA. So while there's some areas where we're, kind of, I don't want to say phased out, but the light's kind of dim there. We still, for lack of a better analogy, we're still shining bright in terms of we've built those relationships with our OP, with our Office of Procurement. So we're very much still a part of requirements development teams.
And I have no doubt you all are persevering and like working and figuring out a way to do it, especially, at NASA and the Air Force too. Yeah.
All right, so let's, we had a question and it's related to our next topic, navigating, SBIR, SITR, and also alternative pathways. And the question was, the SBIR program has not been reauthorized. Does look like it's getting, closer, so you don't have to comment on that. But outside of, SBIR, let's go to you, Colonel, because I know OTAs, if we were talking much more about AI, then I'm sure OTAs would come up a lot. And I was University of Virginia put together a good study that came out this week, recommending OTAs as a way to handle intellectual property as it relates to AI, commenting on what's been in the news with Anthropic and in the Department of War. So, Colonel, can you speak a little bit to, alternative funding mechanisms outside of SBIR?
Yeah, so just want to highlight one, SBIR program is very important, so we want to get that reauthorized. So encourage folks to, if you have concerns there, to reach out to your congressman and help get that over the fence. Again, I think it will be very soon, but that's a massive program that benefits small businesses. But yeah, as far as other opportunities, OTAs are a great source. And again, the administration's put a lot of focus on utilizing things like OTAs more, right? And to look at non-FAR based contracts, because the reality is, the FAR can be a barrier for new entrances to federal government, because if you've been in, it doesn't look like commercial contracts. A lot of the things in it are pretty weird, right? All kinds of crazy clauses that, like, what is this, right? I mean, doing your first FAR contract can be very, very challenging. So things like OTAs can very much lower the barrier to entry. And I see them being used more and more across DoD acquisitions. As far as, there is still a large amount of non-SBIR small business work being executed across the Air Force and the Department of War. I'll give an example. In the organization I fall under, AFRL, we do over $1 billion annually of non-SBIR small business contracts. And, work closely with the small business office here in AFRL, which, type in small business to AFRL, you'll see that. But also in my LCMC counterparts, each of those program offices have, small business counterparts there, and are looking at opportunities to bring in, more than just traditional 5 or 6 large primes. And so I really encourage folks. Apex accelerators are what was mentioned by Ann. That's a Department of War program that spans across the U.S. Right, and there's Apex Accelerator offices. I mean, even just in Ohio, I think there's 5 or 6. So I very much encourage small businesses to leverage those, leverage the small business representatives we have throughout the acquisition ecosystem in the military. Again, the Air Force, all of our program offices and centers. And again, we do large volume of work, and so I think there's a large amount of opportunities, and really like our goal is, with the Center program is to transition programs, and companies to a lot of these other opportunities to be able to win non-cyber contracts. And so, I think there's a very diverse, and I think it's growing. I mean, I'm going to be going to the AFA conference next week, which is Air Force Associations. It's kind of like our big Air Force conference. But as I go to like the industry floor on that, like compared to like say 10 years ago, I'm seeing more and more opportunities for small businesses, really, priorities on things like open system architecture and not being vendor locked to like one large prime for the entire ecosystem. And I think those initiatives have been around for a long time, but you're starting to see those pay off in, real like areas where it's not just, we're going to award to this one large prime and then that's going to be the whole ecosystem. Now, I understand we've always had our second and third tier suppliers through our primes, but there's more and more opportunities even directly with the Department of War and the Air Force.
That's great. I think it's great to remind everyone that, programs and initiatives that were started years ago are now starting to have, more and more of an impact in 2026. Lizzie, what's your industry perspective on this?
Yeah, I think I don't have much to add on what the colonel said, right? And I'm thrilled that there's been more opportunity, especially in the Air Force, which is also known to be very good to work with as a small business. But I would love to touch a little bit on kind of the working, pursuing prime opportunities directly, if that's okay, versus,
Sure.
with a large integrator, right? Because I think one of the things, the polls popped up in front of your face on my computer. Okay, there you go. I think one of the things that over the last 10 years, right, that's happened through the process of category management, and now especially with consolidation focus on OneGov, which, GSA said was category management accelerated, was government buying shifting to larger contracts with less slots, right? So there are a lot of different strategies that industry has to pursue, like Anne had mentioned previously. But I think that those requirements they've been dictated on a lot of vehicles, have told companies that they need to really enter into mentor protege joint venture agreements to get on these opportunities for the next 5 or 10 years. And there's a lot of policy focus shifting to this, I think, in this new environment over the last year, and how smalls can get opportunity there, whether it's through on-ramps or kind of other strategies. But just for an example, approved purchasing systems or impossible past performance requirements. And I say impossible as a small because I've seen vehicles where the small would bump out of their small business status if they actually met those past performance dollar requirements. So like, for example, I'll pick on CIOSB4 because it was just canceled. There were years of protests because of this, right? And so I think smalls are finding, go, no go bids harder, but also trying to figure out where to put their resources and should they partner with the large companies or try and go after them directly. So I think that's a trend we're going to keep seeing where subcontracting is more important. And also, again, being in these MPJV arrangements to get on these vehicles for the long term.
So Lizzie, are you saying that partnering in kind of 2026 and 2027 is going to be in subcontracting more important than it has in the past?
100%. And unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, not because, I'm anti large vehicle. And again, NASA Stoop is one of the best vehicles in the government, and everyone in industry praises it endlessly. So we'd like it to stay at NASA. But I will say that, yeah, with the less slots, right? That's less opportunity. That's less opportunities for smalls who have innovative solutions to actually get to the places where the government is buying. So, all about consolidation. But I think those strategies are having to shift, and companies are trying to figure out where to put those B&P dollars, and there's a lot more, I think, in those buckets than previously. I mean, and both of
Yeah.
you interact with smalls all the time, so if you see something different, obviously please chime in.
I think you're right on target with everything that you said about subcontracting, and a company having to look at those risks of bid and proposal costs and proposing as a prime when, maybe they don't have an abundance of relevant experience. And even though, the FAR has for no past performance, it's neither favorable or unfavorable, but in such a competitive environment, that just doesn't serve a small business coming in or prime opportunity with lack of relevant experience. And also the whole subcontract.
I think Xfinity got the better of a hand on
Yeah,
that answer.
and can I just add something versus the,
Sure.
direct contracts versus partnering with
Yeah,
another
that would be great.
company? I mean, we try to push both pathways, and I think it's sometimes very dependent on what the technology is. And so even folks,
I mean, that's
you know, going through like the cyber pathways, right? Some of those are, you know, technologies that are great to try to work with some of the larger companies and bring those technology solutions in either as a subcontractor, and then others are maybe more appropriate for a direct to federal government type of contract. And encourage folks not to constrain themselves to just one of those paths, right? To be working partnering opportunities with other companies, while also working for those opportunities with the government. And we're trying to push a greater defense industrial base, whether it's our second and third tier suppliers. The healthier base you have there, the better off we are as a nation, in those subcontractors. But also, having more solutions being proposed, to the government contracts is great as well. So we really are trying to push companies to go to explore opportunities both ways.
And in that scenario, is partnering more a means to an end where, the small contractor still has a similar relationship with, the right people at AFWERX or whatever, the office is. And then as interest bills and value is demonstrated, ultimately, the small contractor, small business gets, starts moving down a partnering path, to facilitate, just to facilitate award rather than, hey, they're totally behind the scenes. No one at AFWERX knows who they are.
For sure, right? And I think part of what we do is, to help with some of that brokering and building relationships and what's the best path for things to go. So I mean, it's a complex and full contact sport to get your technology over the line and get what that next opportunity is. And it's definitely, you're juggling. The best way to go is to be working multiple paths forward at once and seeing what works.
So currently, you just touched on relationships. I think this would be a great topic for all three panelists. We have about 6 minutes left, so we'll get to one or two more topics for sure. This one, and I think I talked to about a dozen procurement executives, civilian Department of War. Everyone brought up, you need a trusted relationship built over a period of time. A way to earn trust is through past performance, whether that's at another agency, but even state and local government was offered up. With respect to, we'll stay with you, Colonel, like with respect to AFWERX, like and AFRL, like what is that pattern you see of relationship building where someone gets to a successful outcome, and that might be, hey, there's nothing here for you, based on your technology. So, obviously some of these conversations, end off in, not moving forward. So what's that best practice and pattern that you see that you like?
Yeah, well, I would say one, I find the SBIR program good to start that pathway, right? Because it's hard to go get a contract when all you've done is a paper. That's all I've got, right? Here's a paper proposal, and I haven't done I would say anything that's like real, right? Like and so getting those opportunities through things like the SIMR program to develop prototypes, show work, even if like your follow-on contract isn't exactly that, it's demonstrating the capability to perform and to do work, right? And then I think a big part of moving forward and building trust is listening on both sides, right? So sometimes you get companies who want to meet with you and they only want to sell you like this one specific way and this very very specific thing that they have, and sometimes it's like, well, that's kind of nice. I have something similar, right? And the ability to listen to what the government needs and to adapt to that, I think, is also very, very important into building the trust and moving forward.
Lizzie, what do you see as a pattern of like successful relationship building?
Well, I would say you don't have to do this alone. People can make introductions for you, right? So I would say look in your network, who has a relationship or the ability to do a warm introduction or get you in the right room. Attending those industry days or other forums like the Air Force conference that the Colonel talked about, or the webinars Anne mentioned that NASA does. All of those are important pieces to be able to build those relationships. And again, it doesn't have to be a shot in the dark. Use your network that you have. And I will say, I have never seen a group more active on LinkedIn than government contractors. Oh my goodness. So also a good place to start getting to know people as well.
And can I add, like, your network should be other companies too, right? So,
Yeah.
like, become really good friends with other companies who've been able to successfully navigate, right? Because they're going to have a lot of feedback and lessons learned, right? And so that's part of that partnership is finding fellow companies and industry contacts to help that have been there.
Absolutely.
And I'll
And
just,
anything
I'll just add that in terms of industry events, just a plug, that we did have an industry event at KSC. It was called LIFT, Leveraging Industry and Supply Chains for Future Technologies. There was a auditorium filled with contractors, primes with tables, and small business. And there's another one scheduled for this year, and it's going to be at Johnson. And one of those things I said in the beginning, that those strategic priorities is to have a signature event. And so for NASA, for our small business programs, it's called the LIFT event, and that's going to be the annual event. And it just a lot of resources and a lot of contacts and building of relationships there, and that's where it starts. And we have small business specialists there that actually take companies like, oh, let me introduce you to this prime, because you recognize, oh, I just heard them say that they're interested in this. So it's really, just echo everything that's been said so far. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that event coming up sometime this year, which will be posted on our website. So just monitor that.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne. We have about 30 seconds left, so I'll just wrap up. We had a few more topics, but we got in a little more depth on a few of them, which is great. So thanks everyone who attended today. We're going to be collecting some of the websites that our panelists mentioned and following up with a note to all our participants. Thanks very much to Colonel Stuckey, Lizzie Sullivan, and Haas for your time today. Really amazing discussion, super topical, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.